All right, let's get right into it. You got China, the dragon of the East, and Japan, the land of the rising sun. These two are absolute powerhouses, right? And their relationship goes back almost 2,000 years. But right now, it is more tense than pretty much ever before. And the stakes? They could not be higher. You hear some analysts saying that a major conflict isn't just some far-off possibility, but an impending inevitability. Wow, that's a heavy statement. So what is going on that's pushing these two giants right to the brink? Let's break it all down. Well, a huge piece of this puzzle is Japan's pretty shocking change of pace. You know, for decades, ever since World War II, Japan has had this pacifist constitution. But that is changing, and it is changing fast. The country just announced its biggest military buildup since the 1940s. And listen, we're not talking about some minor budget tweak here. Japan is literally pledging to double its military spending to 2% of its GDP, and they're going to do it over the next 5 years. That is a massive commitment, and it tells you everything about the shift in their thinking. So what does that 2% actually get you on the world stage? Well, by 2027, that spending spree is set to make Japan the #3 biggest military spender on the entire planet. The only countries ahead of it, the United States and, you guessed it, China. And Japan isn't really playing coy about why they're doing this. This is the official line, straight from the Japanese government. They see China as the greatest strategic challenge ever. So this whole rearmament thing, it's not happening in a vacuum. It's a direct reaction to what they see as a major threat. But this modern-day arms race, this tension you can cut with a knife, it didn't just pop up overnight. And that brings us to the real question we have to dig into. Where does all this hostility actually come from? To get what's happening today, we've got to go way back, centuries back. So our first stop is this deep ideological split that started forming long before anyone was even thinking about battleships and fighter jets. It all kind of starts with this 17th century intellectual movement. It was called Kokugaku, which basically means national learning. And it was this big coordinated effort by Japanese scholars to figure out what it meant to be Japanese, totally separate from any outside influence. So the whole idea behind the Kokugaku movement was this belief that Japanese culture was uniquely pure. They wanted to scrub away what they called corrupting foreign influences. And who is their main target? China. Chinese philosophy, its writing system, its traditions, all of it was seen as something that needed to be purged to get back to a pure Japanese identity. And to really drive their point home, the Kokugaku scholars would point to China's history of constantly collapsing dynasties, what they called a cycle of terror and suffering. Then they'd compare that to Japan's own imperial line, which they saw as this unbroken, stable, and in their eyes, superior symbol of their nation. Okay, so that ideological groundwork, it really sets the stage for what happens in the 19th century. This is a period that would see a crazy, violent flip in the power dynamic between these two nations. I mean, just think about how fast this all happened. For over 200 years, Japan was totally isolated. Then, boom, 1854, it's forced open. And what follows is the Meiji Restoration, this unbelievably fast period of modernization. In just a handful of decades, Japan goes from a feudal society to being Asia's #1 industrial power. It's insane. And all this incredibly rapid change, it boils over into one single decisive conflict. The First Sino-Japanese War. This right here, this was the moment the balance of power in Asia didn't just shift, it was completely flipped on its head. So why did Japan win? And win so easily? Well, it's really a tale of two completely different approaches to modernization. Japan went all in. Their reforms were fast, they were centralized, and they were focused on building a powerful modern military. Meanwhile, China's Qing Dynasty tried this self-strengthening thing, but it was just too slow, too conservative, and too fragmented. Their military was left in the dust. The end of the war wasn't just a loss for China. It was a deep national humiliation that basically redrew the map of power in the entire region. Just take a look at the terms of the treaty that ended it all. China had to recognize Korea's independence, which basically just handed it over to Japanese influence. They had to give up territory, like Taiwan, and they had to pay a fortune in silver. On top of all that, Japan got special trading rights, the kind of thing only Western powers used to have. And the fallout from this defeat, man, it set off a chain reaction. The humiliation completely wrecked the Qing Dynasty's authority. That weakness was like an open invitation for European powers to carve up even more of China. That, in turn, fueled revolutionary movements inside the country. And eventually, this domino effect led straight to the collapse of China's entire imperial system. Which brings us all the way back to today. So we've seen the ideological seeds of rivalry. We've seen the violent power shift. So how does that long, complicated history echo in the 21st century?
The central argument we're looking at here is that the tensions we see today, they're not just some new problem. No, they're seen as potentially the final tipping point in a relationship that's been rocky and competitive for nearly 2,000 years.
And this isn't just some abstract historical rivalry either. It plays out in very real, very tense modern flashpoints. We're talking about bitter fights over who owns which islands, Chinese ships constantly sailing into Japanese waters, which raises the risk of a mistake. You've got fiery nationalist protests in both countries, and of course the huge military buildups we started with. Each one of these is like a lit match in a very, very dry forest.
And it all leads us back to that one huge question. With this long, dark shadow of history hanging over every single diplomatic meeting and military move, are these two powers just doomed to repeat the conflicts of their past? Is a new and maybe even more dangerous clash on the horizon?